And good day, everyone. My name is Anthony Olivieri. I'm based here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I specialize in geographic information systems, otherwise known as GIS, particularly in food systems and community health. Today, I'm going to go over a mapping tool that I developed in partnership with Polk. It's a mapping tool that allows us to explore food security opportunities in Polk County. So before we go into why, in the actual tool, let me go into why we should use maps in general, particularly for something as complex as food security. The first thing is perspective. As you see, with the proverbial elephant off to the side of the screen, we could tell it's elephant from perspective of being a few feet away, but often problems such as food security are very complex. There's poverty involved. There's food access, food quality. There's knowledge about food. There are many, many pieces to the elephant of the problem of food security. And maps allow us to get the perspective of all the pieces, see it all together at once. We get to see these in many scales, everything from the small plot of the community garden, to the school, to the city, to the neighborhood, to the county. Or we can look at various scales and we can zoom in and out of these scales. Also, what's important is the collaboration piece. Maps allow us to collaborate across partners. Food security and the health issues associated with it require cross-collaboration from the city to institutions, to nonprofits, to faith organizations. It's a multifaceted problem. It is dealing with the one problem of food security. So this tool is one way that we can gain collaboration and common perspective of the problem. The map that we developed has about 20 layers, and these layers break down to about 61 supermarkets, 55 feeding organizations, 155 schools, and these are situated in census tracts, which I'll go into a little bit. The census tracts are neighborhoods, so we get to see the social vulnerability of these neighborhoods and also their health status conditions. So we have these food and socioeconomic layers, which provide the context for the point layers, such as our supermarkets and feeding organizations and schools. So for example, as a context layer, social vulnerability index, or otherwise known as the SVI. The CDC made the SVI as a way of mapping social vulnerability into one scale. That scale is 0 to 1, 1 being the most vulnerable. Off to the far right of this diagram of the SVI are the 15 census measures, the US Census measures at the tract level that the SVI incorporates. So everything from poverty to mobile homes. These 15 measures are aggregated and organized into 4 themes: socioeconomic status, household composition and disability, minority status and language, housing and transportation. And these are then incorporated into an overall score of SVI. So each of these have a score. So socioeconomic status, 0 to 1, minority status, 0 to 1, but there's an overall score as well of 0 to 1 of overall social vulnerability. And this allows us to look at Polk County or any area that we're interested in and understand the social vulnerability of that particular area. It's called a census tract, but otherwise, also it's known as like a neighborhood level. And this allows us to see the context for vulnerability, particularly for food security. This is much easier metric than if we were to map 15 layers. So if we were going to map poverty and seniors and mobile home structures, those who live in mobile home structures, we would get a very messy map, but this allows us to see it all one metric. And we'll see that in a little bit. What's also available in the mapping system are layers or contextual layers at the tract level, the neighborhood level, for 3 major dietary health outcomes: heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. We know that food insecurity directly relates to these health outcomes. So as part of the multifaceted problem of food security is also looking at the health outcomes because of food insecurity. and how social vulnerability and diabetes and obesity and heart disease interact allows us to give multiple perspectives and layers to see how health, social vulnerability, and food insecurity interact, and the assets and how those assets are positioned with these conditions. So going back to our site layers, these are the main layers that we have, just to give you a sense of the data behind them. So we have 55 feeder organizations in our map, but it doesn't just mean we just have these little points and just the addresses. Each feeder organization has 34 attributes or points of information behind them. So 55 times 34, that gives you the permutations of how much information we have just with these feeder organizations. So this information for each of these organizations is such as, does it have a kitchen or not? In this case, this particular feeder organization is not listed to have a kitchen, it's a 0. Does it have refrigeration? Is it a freezer, a pallet jack, lift gate, concrete pad? It's warehouse square footage, it's cold storage. And some of this information may not be populated yet, and the map gives us the ability to edit these attributes and add that information. So if this particular feeder organization does indeed have some square footage of warehouse, and it has a warehouse and some square footage, we actually can enter it with another widget. But just to give you an idea that behind every point feature, such as feeder organizations, there are multiple attributes behind it. And this allows us to navigate our data through these attributes. And just want to back up a second, just make a distinction. There is a web base map that it feeds into the web app. So the app is basically the map, but it has widgets. And these widgets, what I'll explain, allow you to filter, edit, select, export data layers, allows you to basically make a custom map, allows you to navigate the data. So when I'm going to be showing you a little bit, it is a map. It's the appropriate term. It's a app map or a map app. It's a base map with widgets. It's a functional map that you can manipulate and work with the data. Whereas a typical map, you can look and see, but you really cannot touch and you cannot move things around and work with it. So we just give you some ideas of the basic functions of these widgets, so these functions of a web app. So there's a legend view. It allows you to see the legend. And here we don't show the legend, we're showing the layer view, but here we're on the layer view. And on the layer view, we could turn off layers. We could, if it's checked, we could turn it on. If it's unchecked, it's off. We change the transparency of layers. We could zoom in and out. And when we see something, we want more information, we could click on it and we could view its attributes, such as, for example, if we want to see those 34 attributes behind a feed organization. We could also change the base map. So if we could see if it's a street view, like more like a Google Street View or a satellite view, and we can zoom to a particular address if we like to. So the basic map functions allow you to toggle between layer view and legend view, zoom, change the base map, change transparency, and find locations. These are very basic functions, and some of these you find in a typical map application such as Google. But when we go more into the web app or the map app, there are widgets. And again, the widgets allow you to perform data operations, allow you to navigate through that, all the data. And so we have these widgets built into this map app, info summary, filtering, select and export, editing, the ability to share the map app, ability to print your own map and change how the map looks underneath. And I'm going to give you a little summary of each of these. And then we're going to go through an example that allows us to execute almost all of these functions. So info summary. So info summary is basically a directory. We can have 55 feeder organizations and over 100 schools in our map. And how can it's get very cumbersome to look for a particular item when you're, or feature when you look at the map. Info summary allows you to, in your view of the map, see how many of those features are there. So in this view, there are 14 schools. And then when you click on that info summary item, it gives you a breakdown of what schools there are. When you click on it, it pops up on the map. So if we click on the Columbia Academy of Design, it pops up on the map and we can zoom to it or we can get more information about it. This is a way to navigate through your map through a very quick directory rather than scrolling around the map and zooming in and out. This is quick list. It's something a list with a map is a very powerful tool for navigation. The filter feature or filter by feature widget is another powerful tool. And this really lets you to navigate your data by the attributes. So remember, we said that the feed organizations have 34 attributes, such as have a loading dock, cold storage. With the filter feature, we could narrow down our 55 organizations, or our feed organizations, down to a few, just based on some qualifications. So for example, I did a filter here that I'm only looking for feed organizations that have the square footage in their warehouse between 1,000 and 10,000 square feet. I activate that filter, my 55 organizations turn to 4. And I could go back to my info summary little widget and see that I only have 4 organizations that qualify for that. And I could click on them to find them. I could zoom in. So this is a quick way to filter your data based off of attributes that you're looking for. And of course, we could do that with anything. We could say, I want warehouse footage up to 10,000 square feet, and it has a loading dock. So we can narrow it down even more. So maybe only 1 or 2 that has a loading dock and that. So the number of attributes you add, it narrows down your search. So once you find what you're looking for, and that's a map, one thing you should do is help you find something that you're looking for, find direction or find a place. Once you find the places or locations that you have certain qualifications for, once you find them, it's also useful to get information about it and share it in a typical list. So the select and export allows you to do that. So say we filter our features, we find our 4 organizations that have a certain square footage. We could use the select widget, this little widget up here. We could select it and they turn blue. We could export them as a Excel file if we like, or we could get statistics behind them. For example, we could say, you know what, here are my 4 organizations. How many of them have pallet jacks? How many of them have cold storage? What's the aggregate square footage of warehouse between all of them? I could do that by clicking statistics, and it'll give me the statistics for those organizations by that attribute. So the select and export is a wonderful way of, after you filter things, you find them, and you want to create a list, or you want to get statistics about them, it allows you to do that. The Smart Editor is perhaps the most powerful widget of all of them in the mapping system, this map app. So it allows you to edit the attributes and move the locations, create new features, and delete them. The delete function will probably be disabled during the summit because we don't want people to inadvertently delete items, but eventually the delete function will be live once the map app has a plan for use. But to let you know that for the other feature, for other functions, you can edit the information behind almost any feature on the map. So if a phone number changes, for example, for organization, or its address changes, or if its square footage for its warehouse changes, we could go into editor and actually edit that information. Or if there's a new organization that's created, we can go to the Smart Editor, drag and drop it, and create a whole new feature. In this case, we will create a new feed organization. We drag, drop, and we fill out the attributes features for it. And Share. Share is a very simple app, but it's also very useful because there may be times in your organizations, in your collaboration, where you have a website, a shared website that's password protected, where you want to share the app among yourselves, so you can collaborate among yourselves. And this allows you to create a shorthand link, so you can share it by email. And you also can embed it into your website if you as well. So this is a quick little nice app that saves a lot of the cumbersome process of taking the code behind the map and embedded it into your website, or getting a very long link. It creates a nice short link for you, so you can share it, even in text if you need to, because you can use this app on your phone or your tablet if you want. So now that I've gone over the various widgets, we're going to use many of them in various capacities. The best way to learn is through an example. So let's go through this practice example. So your organization, say you're going to create a food security collaboration between a public school, a farmer's market, and a feed organization. So Maybe you are a funder. You could be a faith organization. You could be a collaborative group, but you have grant money or going for grant money, and the basic design of your collaboration of your project is some type of collaboration between a food security collaboration between a feeding organization, a public school, and a farmer's market. So, but we just don't want to do any arrangement. We have particulars around it. Say there's grant money tied to this, and the grant money says it has to be a highly socially vulnerable area, an area of high poverty and high need. Well, we could use the SVI index for that. So in this case, we're going to use the high to highest SVI. So this feeding organization must be in a census tract of high to highest SVI. It also must be a half-mile drive to at least one farmer's market and to one school within the range. But despite it being a half mile, this feeding organization must have the capacity to have a service range of 15 miles because it should be able to get supplies within a 15-mile range and have at least that capacity. It can't be just stuck to that half-mile range. So we want a feeding organization that has some capacity to go well beyond the half mile for its reach and for collaboration. So here's an example of a feeding organization. And one scenario, we might come up with the same scenario, but there is a feeding organization, this dark purple as the drive-in time around it. And here's some public schools, here's a farmer's market. We will go into the example, you'll see more detail with the actual map app. And so these are tasks. So first, we're going to make a map of the qualified feeding organization and its potential farmers market and school partners. So the feeding organization is farmers market and school partners. We're going to export the data for these features. So export the data behind the organization, the school, and the farmers market. And we're also going to get the information behind the census tract behind it. That's this orange reddish color behind here. We're going to get the data for its SVI. What's the SVI score for the home census tract? What's the obesity rate behind the home census tract? What's diabetes data behind it? So that's going to be our example. So we'll transition into that. And now we are in the web app. So I'm going to show you what it looks like when we load it. So when you load it, it'll give a little symbols like this. It'll take a minute. All the layers will load, and it might take longer if you're on a Zoom call. What pops up first too is the narrative about what the app is about. We explain mostly about that, but what's important here is that there are links to the Social Vulnerability Index and other links to another measure called Community Resilience Factors. But it's just basically a narrative. And we'll close that because it takes up some room. And you can see I can move the map around, I can zoom in and out, and it's centered, it's fixed, it opens up at Lakeland, but you can see all of Polk County if you zoom out. So here's all of Polk County, and there's no data beyond Polk County. And let me show you what some of the widgets, give you an overview before we go through our example tasks. It's preset to open up to legend. So here's our legend. So the Polk County boundary is this pinkish layer right here, around here. There are supermarkets, our farmers markets, and this is our layer list. So what's checked in blue is what is on. So we know we're working in Polk County. So let's shut the Polk County boundary off because we really don't need it. So we shut it off. We go back to our legend, it's no longer there. So to show you that you could turn on and off at the layer view, it shows up on a legend. And so let me go call this up here for what our task is again. So we are to make a map of a feeding organization that has a few qualifications. One it's in a census tract at least 0.72. So here are our census tracts, these SVI. We click on a census tract, we can see this one has an overall SVI of 0.27. And we click on this one's much higher, 0.78. And again, the scale for the SVI is 0 to 1, so 1 being the most vulnerable. And so in this case, this census tract is highly vulnerable. If we look over here, 0.78 is high, whereas this census tract nearby, 0.17 is very, very low. And so we are looking for a feed organization that's with a census tract of at least 0.72, high to highest. So we can see 0.72 is high to highest. So let's go to our filter widget to do that. So we go to our filter widget and we go filter our feeder organizations. But we first could start with our SVI. Here's the filter for SVI. We know we're going to look for census tracts that are 0.72 to 1 to highest, and we could filter that. And now our map zooms out to all the possibilities of census tracts that are only for the high to highest. And so we get an idea now, okay, there are feed organizations in here. Now what we could do is we could zoom in and out to find out which ones are there, but we could still use other widgets to help us narrow down our feed organizations. So let's go to the info summary to see what we got here. So we have 55 feed organizations in all Polk County. And we want a feed organization that's one is in the census tract of qualified census tract. So we narrowed down census tract. But now we also want one that has a service range of at least 15 miles. So out of all these, if you look at our legend, this is the average distance traveled. These are organizations that have service range of average distance travel from always 0 to 100. So this one is like 100 and the one's a small 0. But we want one that has at least 15. We could go through each one and click on them to try to find it, or we use the filter widget to do that. So we go to filter features again. Here's our feed organization filter. And these are all the ways we could filter it, but we're interested in the average traveled is greater than, in this case, it's 15. We want it to be at least 15. So 14, we'll put 14 because we put 15, it's the way it's designed is greater than. So we want greater than 14. So at least 15 miles is the range. So we click filter. And it will now, let's look at our info summary again. So we went from 55 organizations now to 11. So we only have 11 organizations to look at. 11 organizations are in our field division. We can see them. And we want so now we want one of these organizations, all these organizations qualify at least. So we want to make sure we have one that's in a census tract, that is qualified census tract, and that it has at least a school and a farmer's market within its range of a half mile. So let's zoom into a few candidates. So here, this one here, it doesn't have any schools nearby. Actually, make sure we have schools on first. So let's turn schools on. So yep, so here we have a school. So we have a school there. And you know what, the colors are a little difficult to see. So let's change the colors. So we are in our layer list, and the social vulnerability index transparency is a little bright. So we can make it really bright like this, or you make it more transparent. So let's make it a little more transparent, because we've already narrowed down our range. And so now we could see our distance, our half mile distance. This is our half mile distance around the feed organization. So there is a school there. It's not in a tract, but it's close to a tract, but there is no farmer's market. So we don't see a farmer's market. Let's go to our info summary again. And we have no farmer's market in our field of vision. And let's see if we have a farmer's market over here. There's still no farmer's market over there. Oh, there is one farmer's market. And so say if we cannot see it on the map, we know it's there. We want to find it. I can click on it. So great, I can see it's over there. I can zoom to it. And let's see if there's a feed organization nearby. Okay, so there is a farmer's market. There are schools. There's a feed organization, but here's the half mile distance around the feed organization. The farmer's market is way too far away. So that farmer's market would not qualify in this scenario where we want the school, the feed organization, and the farmer's market to be within this little purple blob, the half mile blob. So let me zoom out again, and we could see there's another feed organization over here. There's another farmer's market. So that farmer's market is no longer in our vision. And it shows we do still have one here. And there's one here. We can zoom into it. And this gets a little more closer to it. So we do have a feeding organization, we do have a school, and we do have this farmers market, the Lakeland Downtown Farmers Curb Market. It's not exactly exactly touching the half-mile range, but it's within feet of it. It's pretty close. So I would say these are great candidates. And let's look at these schools here. So we have the schools here. What kind of schools do we got here? We can look at our legend here. So we have elementary school and we have a middle school. So we can tell by our legend that, or we could click on it. So here's the academy. So this academy right here is elementary school. And we also have the middle school next door. So we have a situation here where we do have a feed organization where the schools are definitely within the half-mile range. We already know that this feed organization should have at least 15 driving the capacity to go beyond the scope and be able to go at least 15 miles. Let's click on it. And we can look at its information. So its distribution, its days, average distance travel is 15. So it is 15. And it has a refrigerator, pallet jack, forklift. We don't have square footage recorded here. It may have square footage for warehouse, it may not. But maybe the grant, maybe the reason why we're doing this grant, this is a scenario. Say this feeding organization cannot have square footage for warehouses. It just doesn't have the capacity, doesn't have the capacity to expand and have warehouse square footage. So what if the collaboration is that these schools will provide warehouse square footage for this feeding organization, and the market will provide assistance with food distribution. So the distribution could happen at this location, but also could happen at the farmers market. It's an established farmers market. We could actually look into the farmers market and see by changing the map, we could see what the site looks like. We go to imagery and we see it's situated by a park, and we could see how close, like by street, how close it is within range of the 15 of the half-mile range of the Lakeland Volunteers in Medicine feeding organization. You can see it's very close. We can see various features around it. So this is how we could use our other base maps. And we could also look at a Google Street View and get a sense of the streets, how close it is. This is another way of looking at it. And we can see our academy. And so so one question we need to find out is what's the SPI in this home census tract? So let's click on the census tract. So let me go back to grayscale. The grayscale, you see the colors easily. So this orangey color is the SPI census tract. Let's click on it. And what you see here is it lights up the census tract. There are actually a couple of them. So this one's over here. Let's zoom in a little bit more so we can get it. Over here. So the overall SPI for the home census tract for this feeding organization is 0.94. That's very, very high. Means 1 is the most vulnerable. And the most social vulnerability comes from its household composition, which is 0.98, and its socioeconomic status. So this probably means this census tract has a social vulnerability, where it's probably single head of households. Head of households probably have disability. There are also head of households are probably have high poverty or low median income. The census tract does have high severity, high SPI for minority status and also for transportation. So it's still in the high range. You can see these are the scale for high, but where the most vulnerability is coming from is low income and the type of housing, the type of household composition. So it gives us some type of profile of that. We also want to know the diabetes and obesity of this home census tract. So let's get that information too. So we go to our layer list. Right now we have social vulnerability turned on. We could shut it off. And we could turn on now our obesity. So let's turn on obesity and see what it looks like. You can see obesity and we can see social vulnerability, very similar. We can click them on and off. The obesity of this home tract is 40%, almost 41%. Contrasts in a track not too far away, this track, the obesity is 31%. So if we go back to our legend, we can see that the obesity scale, this is on the higher end of the obesity scale. If we click on 40, you look at this range, it's well within the red, it's very high. What's the diabetes of this track? We could go back to our layer list, we could shut obesity off, click on diabetes. And the diabetes rate is 20%, give an idea what that looks like. 20% is well within the high range. So this is a track that we could, with great confidence, we could say has high social vulnerability, so high social vulnerability, high obesity, and high diabetes. And we could grab that data and we could literally copy it. We could take it, we could say, get the population and copy it and paste it into a report if we want to. And so this allows us to do that. So we're going to make a map though. We're going to make a map of the social vulnerability and the features around this feed organization. So we're going to zoom in a little bit here. So we'll get all the features we want all in one spot. That looks good right there. The name of the farmer's market doesn't pop up, but we could grab it and put it on there later. So we could change that, but it's the Lakeland Downtown's farmer's market. It's only a few of them. The reason why it doesn't pop up because we had a choice of having all these names pop up. It could make it crowded, but we could change that. So we do have our farmer's market and our organization here. And let's do a simple task first of just making the map, and then we'll export some data. So let's go to our map widget. We can print the map. And we situated our map to grab these items. So let's do a landscape of the map. And we're going to do an image. So I like to do images or JPEGs because JPEGs allow you to take the map and export it into a PowerPoint or into a report. PDFs are great too, but PDFs could be very cumbersome if you're trying to put it into another medium, such as a PowerPoint or a report. The copy and paste of it could be a little cumbersome. So the creative process is a little faster with JPEG 2, and the more features you have, the more complex it can be. So we click on now, it's done. We click on it, and we get our map that pops up. This is the map as a result of our print map widget. So we have a map. We could now save this, export it. Now let's get the data. So we want to get the data behind these features, the Lakeland organization, the school, and the farmer's market. We could click on each one and copy it. We click on here and copy this information if we want, but that could be really cumbersome. It's much easier to grab them all at once. So here's our select and export widget. We can move it here if we want. And we're going to want, in this case, we're not interested in farmers and supermarkets. We want schools, we feed organizations. We don't need the data behind that because we have that. We don't need the social vulnerability index data. So we want is our farmers market. We do want the schools, we want the feed organization for sure. Let me move it over here. Actually position this map over here. And we're going to grab these items by doing this. Now that they are blue, that means they are selected for export. We selected our farmers market. We selected our two schools, our feed organization, and we could export this to a file. And when we open that file, we have a spreadsheet of our school in this case. So we can wrap text. So we have the school, we have its address, all the information behind it. We can do the same thing with the feed organization. We can export that, open the file, and now we have all the data behind the feed organization. We have all the data, all 34 attributes, right? There's a kitchen, refrigerator, freezer, pallet jack, and so on. So this is how we could quickly select, and if we don't want these items, we could clear it as well. So say we made a map, we export the data, but say we found out that this Lakeland Volunteers Medicine does have square footage of warehouse square footage. Let's work with the Smart Editor to change that. So I could click on the Smart Editor widget, and I could click on my organization here. And when I do that, all the attributes pop up. And say it does have warehouse square footage, say it has 200 square feet. I could click save. And when I click on it, actually, let me close this. Let me close out the Smart Edit widget. And I click on it, that information will now be present in the pop-up of the square footage. But I'm going to remove that because this is probably not, it's not accurate. I literally just made it up for the demonstration. So I want to delete that information. So I also get to the Smart Editor this way. I go over here, click Smart Editor. It pops it up automatically over here. And I'm going to put it back to 0. And I click Save. So this is a way that we can edit the information in real time on the map. Say if there is another feeding organization that we want to, or there's another feeding organization or another farmer's market. Let's go farmer's market. So we could click on a farmer's market and say there's a farmer's market that we didn't know about. It's just north. And it's just over here. We can click it and point. And we could call it test farmer's market. And we can put in all the other information about it. Let me put the site names. There's a lot of attributes in here. So you may not want to put all of them in, but I just want to show you that you can add the information and fill out all the attributes for it. You can add whether it has WIC or SNAP, zip code, its address, and put all the information in there if you want. I'm not going to add it because I took off the delete function, but to show you how easy it is, you can add things, you fill out all the information about it, you click save, but I'm not going to do that for this case because I don't want to have something I need to delete, but that's just how easy it is. You click, point, and then fill it out, save. You could do this for schools, you could do this for farmers markets, CSAs, and you could do it for feeding organizations. So that concludes the overview of this mapping system. And what we'll do in the summit is we'll have you go through a practice example and that very same example, and you try to replicate what we did. And I'll be here for questions and see how you did. Thank you so much.